Joan woke, already exhausted. The alarm on her phone had been screaming into the dark for several minutes before she managed to fumble for it, her fingers clumsy and half asleep. After missing the screen twice, she finally slapped it silent. A warning flashed, low battery, but she barely registered it. Her eyes locked instead on the glowing numbers at the top. 4:06 a.m. Her stomach dropped. Less than an hour to get ready. Less than an hour to make a drive she already hated. Music was still playing softly through her earbuds, some song she always used to lull herself to sleep. With a groan, she shut it off, tugged the cords free, and dragged herself upright. The room was cold. The house always felt that way. Too big, too empty, like it didn't want her there. She lived 45 miles from the city, deep in a stretch of southern backwoods that barely felt like it belonged to the same state. The place had been cheap, too cheap, but it was all she could afford after leaving home. When she flipped on the light, it stabbed her eyes. She dressed without bothering to close the door or turn it back off. Still moving like a sleepwalker, Joan stepped outside into the wild, unkempt yard. It wasn't really a yard at all, just the edge of a pine forest that pressed right up against the house. Crickets were still singing. The air smelled damp and old. She climbed into the pickup truck, an ancient, ugly yellow thing her parents had dumped on her. It had belonged to her brother once, until he graduated and got a shiny new model as a gift. That same day, her parents had told Joan she was on her own. They called her ungrateful. The word still echoed in her head. She hadn't lasted a full year in college after that. No money, no support, just stubborn pride and the desperate need to prove she didn't need them. So here she was, scraping by, clinging to a lifeguard job she hated but couldn't lose. She sat there too long, lost in thought, when something rustled behind the truck. Leaves, branches, too close. Her heart jumped, and she twisted the key hard, the engine coughing to life. There was a reason the house had been so cheap. The road was cracked and pale, unnamed, barely used. The other houses along it looked abandoned. If anyone lived there, she'd never seen them. As she drove, the road eventually smoothed out. Gas stations appeared. Fast food signs glowed in the distance. Her shoulders loosened. The moon hung full above her, bright enough to feel intentional, like it was guiding her forward. Soon she'd reach the interstate. Once she did, she could relax, cruise, let her thoughts drift until her exit. Until then, her nerves stayed tight. She hated this town, felt it the moment she moved in. Too quiet, too isolated. She escaped whenever she could afford the gas movies, restaurants, friends from her old life. But those trips were rare. Loneliness had a way of settling into her bones. And then there was Austin. She tried not to think about him, but failed. He worked with her at the community pool. The job was simple, mindless, and far away there were no pools anywhere near her house. Austin usually worked the early shift, but after their disastrous date, he'd suddenly gotten sick. Again, he always had excuses, ridiculous ones. Her boss called them bullshit but kept him anyway. Lifeguards were hard to find off-season. Now Joan was covering for him. Again. And she hated herself for caring whether she'd see him again. Lost in thought, she didn't notice the change until it was too late. The streetlights were gone. Trees crowded both sides of the road, dense and dark. The moonlight barely reached the pavement now. Joan frowned, craning her neck. The interstate ramp should have been right here. She kept driving. Minutes passed. Then more. The road stretched on, endlessly. unbroken. Her chest tightened. She slowed down, heart hammering. Had she missed it? She had to have missed it. But how? There were no signs, no exits, nothing. Panic crept in. She thought about turning around, but headlights flickered behind her. Other cars. Few, but enough to make her hesitate. She didn't want a head-on collision on a road she didn't even understand. Her hand brushed her pocket. Her phone. The gas needle hovered just above empty. The road felt wrong. Like it wasn't taking her anywhere. It was taking her somewhere else. She checked the clock. 4:59 a.m. She wasn't opening the pool on time. She might lose her job. But that thought barely registered now. Then salvation. An exit appeared ahead, rising from the dark like a mirage. Joan didn't hesitate. She took it without thinking. The ramp curved and dropped her into a place that felt off. Street lamps buzzed weakly. A diner, a gas station, a few motels. All of it looked old, run down, disconnected from the rest of the world, like it had been placed there and forgotten. Still, it was civilization. She pulled into a wide parking lot beneath a rusted street lamp. The building beside it was boarded up, paint long faded. Unease prickled her skin. She reached for her phone, planning to call her brother. The screen vibrated, then went black, dead. Her breath hitched. She tried to power it on. Nothing. She stared at it, numb. She always charged it. Always. Except last night. She'd been too angry. Now she had no choice. She saw movement in her mirror. A shadow passed behind her. Big. She slammed the truck into gear and sped across the road, skidding into the diner's gravel lot. Light flickered inside. An old woman moved behind the counter. 5:20 a.m. Still dark. Joan rushed inside. The woman startled, but smiled warmly. Southern accent, kind eyes. "Lost, honey?" she said, already guiding Joan to a table. Joan asked for a phone. The woman laughed gently. Said there weren't any. Said no one stayed here long enough to need one. Food arrived. Coffee. Eggs. Then a man walked in. Tall. Confident. Smiling. Luke. For a moment, Joan felt like she could breathe again. He talked. Joked. Flirted. Offered help. Said she could follow him to town. She hesitated. But she had no phone. No gas. No idea where she was. So she agreed. And everything that followed proved that she should have trusted her fear. I was 18 when all of this happened, fresh out of high school, staring down what was supposed to be one of the best summers of my life, but for me, it felt like a countdown to disaster. My dad was old school in the worst way. If I was going to stay under his roof after graduation, even just for the few months before college, I needed a job. No job meant I was freeloading. And he made it very clear that freeloaders didn't live in his house. He hadn't just sprung this on me either. He'd been warning me for years. I could have started looking early. I should have. But I had this bad habit of not taking anything seriously until I was already out of time. So there I was, about a week from getting kicked out, desperately trying to find work. That was easier said than done. My hair was dyed green. I had piercings in my nose and lips, stretched ears, and a terrible stick-and-poke snake tattoo wrapping around my forearm, a masterpiece, courtesy of my 16-year-old self. Employers didn't exactly look at me and think, responsible. Places smiled politely, took my application, never called back. Then, out of nowhere, something awful happened. A police officer was shot and killed on 84th Avenue, not far from a gas station called the Pass and Go. A few days later, A night shift position opened up. Morbid timing. But I didn't have the luxury of being picky. I was the only person desperate enough to apply. 2 days later, I was hired. The pass and go sat on the edge of town, right where things started to fall apart. 84th Avenue had a reputation, and it wasn't a good one. Parts of the road were still unpaved. On the north end, past the gas station, it ran alongside a deep drainage ditch with no guardrails despite decades of complaints. There was a sharp bend further up where drunk drivers and speeding kids learned very quickly that physics didn't care about their confidence. Some of them never learned anything at all. There were no streetlights, no houses, just darkness, trees, and a narrow road that seemed determined to kill anyone who underestimated it. But people around town didn't like simple explanations. A dangerous road wasn't interesting enough. So they decided 84th Avenue was cursed. Cars didn't crash there because the road was poorly designed. They crashed because the road wanted blood. Phones lost signal not because you were far from town, but because something out there wanted you alone. Typical small town nonsense. The woods past the ditch didn't help. Since the early 2000s, 3 bodies had been found there. 1 suicide, 2 shallow graves. For a town our size, that number carried weight. Realistically, it made sense. The area was abandoned, secluded, and ignored. The only people out there at night were the poor souls working graveyard at the pass and go. And trust me, we weren't paid enough to play hero. By the time I dropped off my application, I already knew I'd be working where bad things happened. I just didn't know how close I'd be standing to them. The job itself was easy. I shadowed this guy named Justin for a week. A man who looked like he'd already died once and just forgot to lie down. After that, I was alone. Honestly, I liked it at first. 10 at night to 6 in the morning fit my schedule perfectly. Most nights were dead quiet. Sometimes I wouldn't see a single customer. Other nights, the weirdness of late-night drunks and tweakers kept things entertaining. Those nights aren't why I'm telling this story. The first time something felt wrong was about 2 weeks in. I was a little high, nothing crazy, but enough that my heart jumped when I saw a cop walking toward the door. I'd planned ahead though. Eye drops. Always eye drops. I wasn't scared of getting arrested. I was scared of my dad. I noticed him because the neon open sign flickered. That sign was busted. It would dim or blink sometimes when someone approached. I never figured out why, and I never tried to fix it. When it flickered, it was my cue to look busy. The cop came in, and I leaned back casually, forcing small talk. "See any crazies tonight?" "Not yet," he said, staring at the energy drinks like they were fine wine. "Lucky you," I laughed. "Can't say the same." He picked out a sugar-free Monster and walked up. He looked young, early 20s. Fresh haircut. New badge energy. The worst kind. I joked about a woman sleeping in a shopping cart out back. He laughed. Paid. Normal interaction. As he grabbed the drink, I said, "Stay safe out there." He raised an eyebrow. "You know something I don't?" "Just that cop who got shot out here a couple weeks ago." He frowned. Then he said my name read right off the tag and told me not to believe everything I heard. That 84th Avenue was just a street. That people exaggerated. He left. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I should have. Over the next few weeks, the sign started bothering me. Not because it flickered, but because it flickered selectively. There was a woman who came in once a week for scratch-offs. Same clothes, same tired eyes, same ticket. Every time she came in, the sign flickered. She'd smile and say, Maybe tonight's the night. It never was. Then there was a night in early July. The sign flickered again. I saw a man pumping gas mid-30s, rough-looking. With him was a girl about my age. Black hair, big brown eyes, pale skin. She came inside alone. She bought a bag of Lay's and a red Gatorade. We talked. She hinted at doing something crazy, overnight, a road trip. Something about her felt wrong. Not scared, not forced, just unresolved. When they left, I noticed a passenger window of the truck was shattered. I told myself it wasn't my problem. That's the lie that haunts me the most. Everything broke in mid-July. A biker stumbled in, drunk out of his mind. The sign flickered violently. He bought cigarettes, and when he walked back outside, he was already dead. Head crushed, teeth missing, bone protruding from his arm, blood everywhere. He looked at me with complete, sober regret. Then he drove away. Security footage showed nothing. No biker, no customer. Just me, talking to empty air. That's when I started searching names. That's when I saw Officer Brady's face on the news. That's when I learned the scratch-off woman had died years earlier. And that's when I understood what the sign was doing. It wasn't warning me about customers. It was warning me about ghosts. When Officer Brady came back, still smiling, still unaware I knew the truth, I quit that night. But I didn't leave, because I remembered the girl, Amber. I searched for days. Then I found her, missing, 17. Last seen getting into a red truck. I knew she was dead, and I knew she'd died nearby. So I went looking. I found glass. I found a bag of Lay's. I found a tarp, and I called the police. They found Amber Wicker's body that day. They arrested the man who killed her. It didn't bring her back. Nothing ever could. On my last night at the Pass and Go, the sign flickered again. She came back, clean, whole, still alive. I paid for her snacks. I told her she reminded me of a friend. When she left, I followed, and only then did I see her as she truly was. Bruised, strangled, dead. She thanked me. Then she disappeared. The sign stopped flickering, and I was alone. I'm writing this because no one else will. Because my family decided silence was easier than remembering. And because whatever happened out there never really stopped, it just learned how to hide. I grew up just outside Preston, a small town in southern Idaho where everyone knows everyone and nothing ever really changes. Fewer than 5,000 people lived there, and most of them were spread far apart. My own home sat at the end of a forgotten dirt road called Bear Creek. It wasn't really a neighborhood, more like a loose agreement between fewer than 20 families that this stretch of land belonged to us. I loved the isolation. Out there, space felt endless. Fields rolled on until they blurred into sky, and neighbors were close in the way only rural people understand, not by distance, but by necessity. We were a Mormon community. Church wasn't just something you attended, it structured your life. Sundays, youth activities, service projects, it all overlapped. The girls were part of Young Women's. The boys joined the Boy Scouts, which doubled as a church group in our area. Summers meant swimming in the reservoir, 4th of July fireworks at the ballpark, and potluck dinners where everyone brought the same casseroles every year. It was quiet, safe, predictable, or so we thought. Our house was old, 92 years old at the time. A farmhouse built by my great-great-grandfather, sitting slightly uphill from the road. On one side was a wide, open field of grass. On the other, the dirt road curved down toward the creek bottoms. Southern Idaho is mostly dry desert land, sagebrush, dust, burrs, but the creek was different. Water changes everything. Down there, pussy willow bushes grew thick and tangled, creating a dense green maze. In late fall, we'd go down and gather the soft white seeds to decorate the fence along our driveway. Living that far out, wildlife wasn't unusual. A moose and her calf wintered in our orchard every year. Coyotes called at night. Even mountain lions weren't unheard of, though they usually passed through quietly. The summer I turned 8, the same year I was baptized, a young mountain lion was spotted nearby. No one panicked. Big cats avoided farms. They moved on when food ran out. That same summer, our neighbor Peyton was working toward his Eagle Scout rank. He was obsessed with National Geographic and dreamed of becoming a wildlife photographer. The lion thrilled him. He decided to document the creek bottoms and even emailed National Geographic for advice. They suggested a motion camera, automatic shots every few seconds, and bait. Nobody liked the idea of live bait or dead animals, so we chose sound instead. We set up speakers hidden among the willows and played a recording of a dying rabbit on a loop. I heard it for the first time while the adults tested the system. It was unbearable, high-pitched, frantic, almost human, like a child screaming until their voice breaks. Once you hear that sound, it never really leaves you. The plan was simple. Leave everything running for a week. Let human scent fade. Let curiosity do the rest. That night, I was relieved I couldn't hear it from our house. The next night, I woke up screaming silently into my pillow. The sound was back. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. I knew the loop. I had memorized it the first time I heard it. And yet, this didn't make sense. The speakers had been running all day before without reaching us. I didn't sleep. Neither did my parents. Morning came with dark circles and no explanations. Dad said, the wind must have carried it. Mom wanted to check the equipment. Dad refused. By daylight, the sound was gone. The second night was worse. Louder, slower, wrong. Parts of the recording dragged, distorted, like warped tape. Other times, the loop didn't restart properly, jumping mid-screen, skipping, repeating fragments that didn't belong together. By the third night, I stood at my window. The trees were perfectly still, no wind. The screaming slid through the glass anyway. Mom left town the next day. She said she needed space. I stayed with Dad. That night, neither of us slept. He lay too still, like he was afraid movement would attract attention. By the end of the week, the sounds started happening during the day. Short bursts, single screams, pieces of the recording, broken and rearranged. Then Peyton's dog went missing. By Saturday, the noise became constant. No loop, no rhythm. Just something imitating pain without understanding it. When Peyton finally went to retrieve the equipment, he came back minutes later white-faced, vomiting, shaking so hard my dad had to catch him. The police came. No one told me anything, but I saw the camera. I turned it on. I wish I hadn't. The photos showed animals, rabbits, cats, the missing dog, the mountain lion, all arranged, scalp removed, placed in lines like they were marching. The final image was an eye, yellowed, crusted, too close. Not an animal, not human. Later, I heard the police say the speakers malfunctioned. They said the recording only played one night. Everyone else accepted that. I didn't, and that's why I'm writing this.